Part 95, Function of Intelligence. Listen to a part of the sayings from the book, Culture of Energy Living, on the topic, Function of Intelligence, by Dr. Lubisha Stoyanovich, who received all of the above from the superintelligent energies of the cosmos in deep meditation. There are several energy systems in the aura that look like the root of a plant with rootlets and root hairs. There are such systems throughout the entire volume of the aura, and their number ranges from 3 to 19. The ends of the roots are interconnected by thin threads. Particles of intelligence, or, rather, particles of knowledge, are stored in these roots. They emerge from the tips of the rootlets as dots and move freely through the aura towards the brain. This movement of particles towards the brain only happens when a person starts to think. Then, from the corresponding subsystem, for that area of thinking, particles from the tips of one or more rootlets move towards the brain. When they reach the brain, they activate its work in that area. The influx of particles lasts as long as the thinking lasts. The number of subsystems or roots is innate. However, their development or branching depends on the application, with the fact that the period from the first to the third year of life is the most important for the development of the subsystem. This is when the development of the thick roots that define a person's capabilities is completed to the greatest extent. The development of the net of rootlets begins in childhood and continues throughout life. The net of rootlets collects information that arrives in the aura, but not directly, rather from the network of information energy, with which it intertwines for contact and reception. The wider and more developed the net of rootlets, the more knowledge the particles will carry. The brain is not connected by any channels or paths to the tips of the net of rootlets from which the particles come out, but they are directed towards that part of the brain that was activated even before the thought developed. These particles carry knowledge that has been collected in the aura since birth, and this knowledge allows the brain to find a solution when thinking. So, these are not particles of intelligence, but particles of knowledge, which enable the brain to find a solution, often among several offered, that the particles bring to it. In the aura of animals there is only one root, which is small and poorly developed. It is most developed in the chimpanzee, but it also has only one root. Plants do not have any roots, but only root hairs in various places in the aura. The basic difference between plants and animals is in the root, because without it continuous thinking is not possible. The root represents a reservoir of particles that are extracted from it as needed and sent to the brain. Plants don't have it, so they don't have the possibility to store particles of knowledge, except for the limited possibilities in the rootlets. Therefore, the thinking of plants is also related to the period immediately after receiving the information in the aura or a little earlier. When the reservoirs are full, new particles of knowledge throw out the oldest ones, which are no longer relevant, so that older knowledge is destroyed. The brain of the plant is the whole plant, which receives particles of knowledge from the rootlets that currently have information. In plants, the most common cause of thinking is the appearance of new information in the aura, while true thinking based on old particles is limited by the possibility of storing particles in the rootlets. In animals, about 30% of the thinking challenge comes from old knowledge collected in particles, and in chimpanzees as much as 45%, while the rest comes from fresh information. In humans, the ability to think is defined by the number of roots and their development and branching, as well as the place in the aura. Children with developmental disabilities have two roots with a poorly developed net of rootlets and several special nets without roots. These roots are located in the central part of the aura, so they receive a smaller amount of information, but of all kinds. In some children with developmental disabilities, there are, in addition to the nets, also rudiments of roots that could partially develop. The lower limit in normal people is 3 roots and usually a few nets with root buds or stumps. In addition, most people have a more or less developed system of rootlets, up to the number of missing roots, up to 19. People with 19 roots do not have additional nets, because the system is fully developed. All the roots are usually not maximally developed, and the development of the net depends on the use. Some of the nets are the most developed, usually those with a fully developed root, while some others, whose root is also fully developed, but is not in the person's area of interest, have only rudimentary branches. The number of these roots in the aura is directly related to intelligence. The more there are, the more intelligent a person will be. People with up to 5 roots in their aura are extremely unintelligent. The average corresponds to a number of 7 to 11, and genius appears in cases where there are more than 15. The extent to which these possibilities will be used largely depends on the frequency and length of activation of this system, especially in the period up to the age of 3. Of course, the number of roots is not the only factor, because it is possible that people with a smaller number of roots, provided that they maximally practice the work of this function, reach a higher level of intelligence than those with a larger number of roots, but with their minimal activity. The tabular overview of the ratio between the number of roots and the level of intelligence is as follows. Extremely unintelligent people have from 3 to 5 roots. Non-intelligent people have from 5 to 7 roots. Averagely intelligent people have from 7 to 11 roots. Above average intelligent people have from 11 to 13 roots. Extremely intelligent people have from 13 to 15 roots. Geniuses have 15 to 17 roots. Multiple geniuses have 17 to 19 roots. By harmonizing all the functions of the aura, this function will be maximally activated, contacts with the brain will be better, which will facilitate understanding and solving problems, thus an increase in intelligence. This will again increase the desire to think, which will affect the expansion of the rootlets net, which further leads to an increase in intelligence. The treasury of sacred knowledge is grateful for your interest and sends you a lot of spiritual patience and love.